Hello and welcome to part 2 of the Scylighter Schema, how to analyze incredible nonfiction, how to organize and extract the most useful tidbits from the nonfiction books that you read so that you can be a better writer, brilliant writer. That's our goal here, right? So I personally read, I would guess, more than 50 nonfiction books a week because I usually, not a week, what am I saying? A year. Because I usually read about 120 books a year, give or take, dozen or so. And I tend to lean more heavily on the nonfiction side. That used to be, when I was a kid, it used to be more fiction. Now it's more nonfiction. So over the years, I have processed hundreds, maybe thousands, of nonfiction books. And this is the schema that I came up with to organize all of those nonfiction books in my head and extract the most that I can out of it. Hopefully this will help you as well. This is based on an article that you can see on Medium. It's called How to Analyze and Retain Nonfiction Books and Articles, so you don't waste your time, so you don't waste your reading time, because there's less and less time to read as you grow older, so you want to make the most of every minute that you have. All right, so let's begin with the 3 concentric circles. If you've seen the Scylighter Schema Part 1, then you are familiar with our concentric circles. This is basically levels of analysis. And this is based on the idea that human beings, we are tripartite beings, which means we have 3 parts. And that influences the way that we create things, particularly books. So human beings were like body, soul, and spirit, right? So the way that I analyze books is core, concept, and craft, and they correspond. The spirit is kind of like the most mysterious, hard to define essence of who you are. The soul is more like, it's not a physical, tangible thing necessarily, but it would be like your mind and your emotions. So yeah, that's what it is. And then of course the body is very easy to define. It's visible, it's tangible, it's every, child knows what the body is. So those are the 3 concentric rings, the 3 levels of analysis that I go through when thinking about each book. Let's start with the innermost circle, the core, which is kind of corresponding to the spirit in a human being. So what is the core of a nonfiction book? Basically, it's the worldview that the writer has. And every single person has a worldview. Everybody believes something. They have a system of belief that came from somewhere. There's no exceptions to this rule. Even if you don't consider yourself religious or philosophical, doesn't matter. There is something you do believe in. You could call it a hierarchy of values or whatever. So this is the core of people who write nonfiction. And if you take all nonfiction, it kind of boils down to 2 main ideas. The first one is self-improvement, which is the idea that humans can improve themselves if they just know how and are willing to put in the effort. And then the second one is love of knowledge, which is basically that knowing stuff is fun and useful for its own sake. The thing is, though, that human beings, we have a dark side and a light side. It's kind of like Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He had this quote that says, "The line that separates good and evil runs through every human heart," something like that. Which is the idea that there's no such thing as, oh, you're all good and evil is just out there and you have to defeat evil by, killing other people or whatever. Like, that's not how it works. Every human being has kind of a dark side and a light side. So when it comes to ideas, when it comes to nonfiction books, they can kind of fall somewhere on the spectrum between dark and light as well. And so each of these 2 main ideas kind of has a dark rendition and a light rendition. So for example, the first one, self-improvement. The light side of this is that you can accomplish great things, but you should also have some humility because there are some limitations. Human beings, we're not omnipotent, we're not God, but we are capable of astounding ourselves if we choose to do so. And I mean, there are some great inspirational stories of people who have overcome incredible odds and done amazing things, and you can read lots of biographies like that. It's really fun. The dark side of this, however, is that people have no limits, and no limits in every sense of the word. Like, you can do literally anything that you put your mind to. And this is kind of the philosophy behind things like Gnosticism, a lot of new agey weird things like that. And basically it's like there are no limits, there is no right. It's like that the Frozen song, Let It Go. I really hate that song, and this is the reason why. There's a line that goes, no right, no wrong, no rules for me, I'm free. It's like, nah, that's not real freedom, but okay, that's a side story. Anyways, the point is, people who feel like they can literally become God, and that they can make up their own morality. They can decide their own right and wrong. They can push past all limitations, physical, societal, natural, like no laws apply to them. That's very dangerous. So you can take the self-improvement thing in that direction, and that would cause chaos and devastation in your life and in other people's lives. So that's the dark side of this first idea. And to give you some examples, so light side, I chose Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People because the reality is, if you use the tips that he gives in the book, like for example, one that really sticks out to me is just be a good listener. When you're talking to somebody, don't talk about yourself all the time. Just be open to hearing what other people have to say. If you actually do that in your life, it really will make you a more likable person. It really will help you to make friends and influence people, hopefully for the good, right? So ideally use those ideas in a healthy and beneficial way. So that's the light side. On the dark side, I chose The Little Red Book by Chairman Mao. And people like this guy, they have this idea that they can control and manipulate other people, not for other people's good, but for their own good. And the problem is sometimes these people are self-deceived. They think that they're doing it for other people's good, or so they tell themselves, and they tell others. But they're not, they're tyrants. They're trying to control other people. There's a difference between wanting to present yourself in the best light possible so that other people have a good time interacting with you, versus wanting to manipulate people in order to get them to do what you want at their expense. So that's the dark side. So that's an example of light side and dark side in terms of self-improvement. You can improve yourself to become very likable and very kind and use that power for good, or you can not really improve yourself, I suppose, but you can empower yourself to become very powerful and controlling and manipulative so that other people have to listen to you, and that's the dark side. All right, then the second idea is the idea, I call it love of knowledge. So the light side of love of knowledge is that it's fun to explore things, There's this verse in Proverbs, I think it is, that says it's the glory of God to conceal a matter, and to search out a matter is the glory of kings. So in other words, you can kind of sometimes conceive of this world as a giant mystery puzzle box for us humans to explore. Kind of like, parents sometimes buy their kids a puzzle or a toy, and they enjoy watching their kids like take it apart and try to find out how this toy works. It's fun. It's fun for the kid. It's fun for the parent. So for us, the same thing. It's like when you explore the world, when you explore history, when you explore something that's real and true and objective and out there, it's entertaining. It's interesting. It's awe-inspiring. It helps you get into flow. Very beneficial. Just even if you don't necessarily have a particular reason for learning about, say, butterflies, like for example, Dale Carnegie, that one, you want to learn about social skills so that you can be a better person in social situations. But here we're talking about just knowledge. Okay. So like learning about butterflies is probably not going to make you a better, salesperson or better at your job unless you're a entomologist, but it's interesting. And so why not, so that's the light side of knowledge. Love of knowledge. Then the dark side of love of knowledge is moral superiority. So it's like, I want to know more than everybody else so that I can be better than everybody else, and everyone else is dumber than me or something. That kind of idea. And also the idea that the more knowledge you have, the more power you have over others. So there's some people who like hoard knowledge, and they're like, I don't want other people to know what I know because it makes me better than them. And that's the dark side. That's not a good attitude to have when it comes to nonfiction knowledge, reading books and things like that. So you don't want to just be reading books because you want to feel morally superior to other people. You want to read books because that's something that makes your life more enriching, So anyways, that's a core. So those are the two main ideas that, examples. The light side is like Leonardo da Vinci by Walter Isaacson, great biographer. And this book is obviously about Leonardo da Vinci, and it goes into great detail about this artist inventor's life. And it's really interesting. And I mean, is it super practical to know every single little detail about Leonardo's life? Maybe not, but it's interesting and it's kind of fascinating, and it can be helpful to different people in different situations. So why not? Then the dark side, I chose this book called The Game by Neil Strauss. It's like a pickup artist book. So there's a lot of like psychology in there. It teaches men how to make women want them or something like that. And this book just kind of reeks of moral superiority. It's like, I know how to pick up women and these other schmucks don't, kind of thing. Like, the book just kind of gives you a leery feeling. So there we go. Example of a light side and a dark side to the love of knowledge. main idea for the core. All right, let's move on to the second level, which is the soul of a book, otherwise known as concept, the concept of a book. So you can talk about like genres here, but I like to do something that I call the LDB system. Now, the LDB system is kind of like the nonfiction correlation to the LMA system. So if you looked at the Scylighter Schema Part 1, we talked about how all fiction falls into these three categories: LMA, love, mystery, adventure. And then all nonfiction falls into these three categories, LDB, which stand for learn, do, and be. So what does each one of those things mean? To learn means that these are books that teach you something new, usually interesting facts or phenomena that they don't necessarily have to be particularly immediately useful. And a good example of this is like The Big Short by Michael Lewis, which talks about the stock market crash of 2008, and it talks about what bonds are, what shorting means, and stock lingo for the uninitiated. And then we have to do, which is represented by this character in the middle, who basically, it means that these books are designed to give people specific and practical actionable steps to accomplish a particular goal. And a good example of this is Ryder Carroll's bullet journal, which teaches readers how to do journaling in a different way. Then we have, on the right, we have B, which changes the way that you are in the world. So it changes your perspective, your core worldview, helps you to see possibilities that were previously hidden from you, or helps you to take away a veil from your eyes, like to disabuse you of some maybe lie that you believed about the world or some inaccuracies. And a good example of this is William Glasser's Positive Addiction. So he talks about how addiction is usually a bad thing, but what if we could make it a good thing? And then he gives some examples of how that might be a possibility. And so that can change your perspective, and you can kind of think, maybe I should try to get myself addicted to something positive. Or maybe if you're addicted to something negative, you could be like, I wonder if I can switch it out for... Anyways, you get the idea. Okay, so let's talk about the final layer of this concentric circle, which is the body, the craft. And this is the easiest thing to talk about because it's literally just the mechanics and the technical stuff. And so yes, grammar, construction, spelling, phrasing, word choice, style, all of that stuff. But also we can talk about structure and the third layer, the body layer or the craft layer, is very much linked to the previous layer, the concepts layer, because concepts affect craft. This is similar to the fiction one that we talked about in Scylighter Schema number 1, but the idea is, like, for example, if the book is, it's supposed to be a learn book where the goal is to help you learn something, then on the craft level, you want to pay attention to, is this book clear? Are the ideas explained in a way that the reader can actually understand? So like The Big Short, for example, one reason why that book is so excellent is because a lot of financial things are really hard for an average layperson to understand. You know, like, what does shorting mean? Why are there different tiers and layers, like the ratings of different bonds? Where do bonds even come from? What is a prospectus? You know, those kinds of questions that people don't even know that they don't know. And so Michael Lewis goes and explains these things in detail without becoming overly pedantic, but or becoming very vague or hard to understand. He's just very clear. You understand what he's talking about, even if you don't really have a whole lot of exposure to the financial world. So he's a really good example of somebody who understands how to write learning books really well, and so on and so forth. So that is it. Those are the 3 concentric layers. This is the Scylighter Schema for analyzing nonfiction. I'm interested to know if this is helpful for you or if you have your own schema as well. And in the meantime, if you haven't yet visited beabrilliantwriter.com to pick up your free brilliant article checklist, make sure you do that. Join our email list. We call that the Merry Band. We try to keep things happy and light and also useful and informative because we're all trying to be brilliant writers, so we're helping each other along the way. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next video. Remember to spread light.